Alfred Hitchcock is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. That's a statement I hear often regarding film discussion. He is an auteur praised for his ability to tell a simple story and its themes visually through a variety of techniques. It was for this very reason that I decided I wanted to analyse a scene from a Hitchcock film in hopes that it would give me an even better understanding of this statement and to understand what exactly makes him an effective filmmaker. And I thought Vertigo would be the perfect place to start. It's one of his most beloved films, and I think it really does include a lot of Hitchcock tropes and cliches. Vertigo was released in 1958 and of course directed by Alfred Hitchcock. It's a thriller that takes many elements from the noir genre, and in order to provide some context, the film involves a man named Scottie who is hired by a man, Gavin Elster, to follow his wife, Madeline, due to the belief that she is possessed. However, this whole scheme was a setup against Scottie by both Madeline and Elster as an attempt for Gavin to murder his real wife. In the scene I will look into, Scottie is spying on Madeline for the first time as she dines with her husband, Gavin Elster, of course Gavin Elster not actually being her real husband. The scene begins with an establishing shot of Ernie's, which is the restaurant they are at, letting us know exactly where the scene is taking place. It's quite a dark shot except for the red tinted windows and the door, which is almost like it's trying to attract us to come in, but also letting us know that this is where the magic is, this is where it's happening. The shot then dissolves into an interior shot. This dissolved cut from the very start gives the scene a slow and dreamy feeling, which is very much fitting for the scene, as we will soon find out. The restaurant Scottie is in is strikingly red. The set design puts a lot of emphasis on red that, it's the first thing you notice when you see this shot. This colour could definitely represent sensuality due to the attraction and desire he will have for Madeline in this very scene. It could also represent danger, as his obsession with Madeline will ultimately be his downfall. This is an example of Roland Barthes' semiotic theory, which consists of various codes, one of which is the semantic code. This code is when something within a media text has connotations and further meaning. The colour red, in this case, has the connotation of danger or sensuality. The scene contains a fantastic panning shot from Scottie to Madeline, which establishes the interior location and shows where Scottie is in relation to Madeline. The camera moves slowly and smoothly, giving the scene a dreamlike quality. At first it seems like the camera is simply panning, but it's almost like Madeline stopped it in its tracks, and the camera then decides to focus in on her by getting closer. When the shot starts, there is no music, just the diegetic sounds of people talking and eating food, but as the camera approaches Madeline, the music starts to swell into this smooth and dreamy piece that represents the feeling Scott is having. There is no question as to what the music is trying to highlight, as we see Madeline placed centre of frame, wearing the only green visible in that frame. Everyone else in that shot is wearing blacks or greys, all except Madeline. Our eyes are instantly drawn to her. Her wearing green is a sharp contrast to the reds of the room. In fact, green is the opposite colour to red on the colour wheel. Hitchcock wants us to see her as the main feature of that frame. The mise-en-scène makes the shot look like a painting almost. Hitchcock takes on this very expressive approach in which everything is positioned to reflect the story and emotion rather than to be realistic. And we'll see more examples of that later in the scene. Madeline wearing green is quite symbolic, as green seems to be a very prominent colour throughout Vertigo. And whilst the meaning of this colour is up to interpretation, I think it represents obsession. Whenever Scottie's obsession takes the forefront of a scene, green always has a large presence within the frame. And of course that is up to interpretation. Green could be whatever you want it to be. We get another shot of her where she's literally within a frame. She's literally within the frame, almost making her look like a painting. The perfect woman in Scottie's eyes. Her being framed also represents Scottie's objectification of her. He views her like a painting, as something to gaze at. It gives the audience a sense of voyeurism. And this relates to Van Zoonen's feminist theory, which states that in media, women's bodies are used in media products as a spectacle for heterosexual male audiences, unfortunately. And in this scene, the heterosexual male is gazing at the spectacle of that scene, Madeline. And similar to that, Laura Mulvey, in her essay Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, created the term the male gaze, in which she states that the gaze of the movie camera reflected the heterosexual male viewpoint of the director. And Alfred Hitchcock was, in fact, a heterosexual male, and the gaze of the movie camera reflected that in a lot of his films. Voyeurism is a theme that comes up in many Hitchcock films, which backs up the argument that Hitchcock is an auteur. And the auteur theory was created by Andre Bazin, and suggests that directors are the main creative force behind the film. Hitchcock's visual storytelling, use of colour, voyeurism, and use of blonde are all in this scene. It's all undoubtedly Hitchcock. These are all things that show up in his other films, and definitely prove that he is, without a doubt, an auteur. But back to the scene. This shot could perhaps represent the fact that Scottie is being framed, due to the fake setup, and Madeleine is just merely an actress. Her being like a painting she's not quite real. But we then see Madeleine and Gavin Elster walk through the frame. There is a moment where Elster stops in the shadows whilst Madeleine moves forward. This moment visually signifies Gavin has a darker side, and shows that Gavin is working in the shadows, which is potential foreshadowing for that revelation later on in the film. It's a very brief moment, and you probably miss it, but you could definitely see it as an intentional foreshadowing. Heavy use of shadows is very typical of the noir genre, and Vertigo most certainly borrows many elements from the noir genre throughout. The camera then follows Madeleine until she stops, presenting us with this profile shot of her. This film is trying to convince us that this is the perfect woman. At least in this scene she is. Every shot of her seems perfectly planned, like her and the camera are coordinated as she walks into a perfect profile shot. She is the main attraction of every frame. The film makes its expressive approach clear again as, during this shot, the walls behind her brighten, giving her this outer glow. This gives her the look of almost an angel, this woman that radiates light. This unrealistic effect seems influenced by the German Expressionism movement of 1919 to 1931. This movement showed an increase in surrealist cinema, in which film had less interest in portraying reality and more interest in creating its own reality that was built around emotion and feeling. The scene in Vertigo is entirely built around Scottie's emotions. The set design is dreamlike, typical of German Expressionist film, and the environment changes based on Scottie's feelings, much like this shot of the background glowing behind Madeleine. We are seeing images through a subjective eye, much like German Expressionism. In fact, Hitchcock says it himself. He says, "I'm a believer in the subjective, playing a scene from the point of view of the individual." And it's evident throughout his work and in this very scene. This shot really lets us see her through Scottie's eyes, as this woman who brightens up the world around her. This shot is a good example of the quote by cinematographer Christopher Doyle. He says, "I think the point of cinematography, of what we do, is intimacy." This is very much true for this scene, in which the cinematography really makes the audience intimate with Scottie's head and how he feels and sees the world in these moments. We can see his infatuation and desire through the cinematography. Throughout the scene we cut to shots of Scottie in which he is watching Madeleine through the corner of his eye. The shot doesn't show him head on, we only see the side of his face, as though he does not want to be seen by the camera, which highlights the fact that he does not want to be seen by Madeleine. Much like Madeleine, Scottie gets a profile shot too, which the film cuts to after showing hers. And although this should have, in principle, been a match cut due to them being very similar shots, the cuts are actually more intentionally jarring than smooth. The profile shot of Scottie places Scottie lower down the frame than Madeleine and cuts out his chin, which kind of betrays the rule of thirds in photography. He is not in the centre of the frame, and the backdrop is a lot darker than the shot of Madeleine. Having similar shots be so different is a fantastic way of highlighting the differences, and also how Scottie feels. Scottie feels inferior to her, and imperfect in comparison, much like the shot is. He holds less power and confidence, which is highlighted with him being lower down in the shot. Whilst she is stood confidently in the light, he is slouched, hidden in the dark. It is in this moment Scottie realises that he may never get to satisfy his infatuation with her. And although the visuals show this, his performance also shows this as well, as he looks upset and slowly looks away. The music also reflects Scottie's emotions in this moment too. As Madeline comes closer to him, the music becomes even more romantic and swells. She's getting closer to him and he's in awe, but then, after he realises he cannot be with her, the music descends into a sadder melody that is less intense and more downbeat. The music is extremely important to the scene and, in a way, gives Scottie a voice when he is not speaking, as the scene is able to convey his emotions just as well as dialogue could. Bernard Herrmann, the composer of Vertigo, as well as many other Hitchcock films, would likely agree with this sentiment, as he states that music on the screen can seek out and intensify the inner thoughts of the characters. It can invest the scene with terror, grandeur, gaiety, or misery. Herrmann's score invests the scene with romance and passion, elevating and intensifying Scottie's inner thoughts, so this quote is most definitely true. As Gavin Elster and Madeline leave the building, they pass a mirror, which gives us a frame in which we can actually see them twice. This definitely seems like an intentional foreshadowing of the revelation that these characters have alternate identities and ulterior motives. These characters are two-faced, quite literally, in this shot. Like earlier, this is another example of Barthes' semiotic code, as this shot has deeper meaning. This whole scene really highlights Hitchcock's skill as a visual storyteller. With no dialogue and in less than 2 minutes, Hitchcock is able to establish Scottie's newfound desire for Madeline. I mean, it's quite impressive, really. This backs up a statement Hitchcock made in a 1969 interview with Roger Ebert, in which he states that he depends more on style than on plot. And he also goes on to say that it's not your content that makes you an artist. A story is simply a motif, just as a painter might paint a bowl of fruit just to give him something to be painting. This belief makes itself clear with this scene, as this moment in this film is very simple and yet extremely powerful and emotional due to the way Hitchcock presents it. The story isn't what's so fascinating about the scene, it's the visuals and the music. You could isolate this scene from the context of the film and it would still work as this artistic piece showcasing a man's infatuation with a woman he cannot get. So after analysing a very short scene from Vertigo, I have found a deeper appreciation for Hitchcock as a filmmaker. The way he is able to visually represent a man falling hopelessly in love in such an expressive and artistic way is an absolute delight. He utilises all the components of film to represent this feeling: the mise-en-scène, set design, costume, the camera work, the framing, the actors, the music. There is so much to pick apart in this scene that I would find something new upon every rewatch. Hitchcock may truly be one of the greatest filmmakers. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you took something away from this video maybe. If you enjoyed this video, please do subscribe. I want to make more videos like this. And hopefully I see you next time. Have a good day.